Good morning. Welcome to Sydney. We're just waiting for a few people to join and then we will get started. For those of you who I haven't met before, I'm Trish Barry.
And I'm Melissa.
We're looking forward to sharing some tips this morning. I guess just as everyone's joining, to give a little bit of context as why we're holding this webinar this morning. There's probably about 30 people joining us. And what we're finding is there's so much conversation at the moment about the role of social media. And in the current climate, there's a lot of discussions around sales and is social media leading to sales and why are we doing this? And we thought it was useful to kind of give some best practice around the elements of social media that are kind of top of the marketing funnel. So are there from an awareness point of view in terms of reaching out to new consumers, about engaging different people with the brand. So that's what stimulated this webinar. We think, as we'll talk to you about today, there's some really interesting trends in terms of connecting with audiences and engaging with those customers who love you most, as well as discovering new fans. So we hope that you'll get a lot out of this session today. We've designed it to be very much practical. There is probably a little bit of a wine lens, although we know that not everyone in the room today is a winery or markets wine brands, but the same principles apply. So this is very much about building community. So we will record. We are recording this session today. We will send through the slides. There's a lot to get through. And we figured rather than lots of questions at the end, we will actually come back to you individually if you do have any questions. So without further ado, what we wanted to achieve today is to really give you an understanding of the current community management landscape. And this is really an evolving discipline. We're finding it has become a lot more professional in larger organizations where community management teams are actually put in place to be able to build and acknowledge communities. So we want to be able to give you some context of where this sits as part of your digital marketing plans, talk you through some of the best practices because this landscape is evolving, and give you some tools and hopefully some really practical tips on what you need to be doing on a daily, weekly basis to think about how to engage consumers with your brands. The focus very much will be Meta because we know that's where a lot of our clients will work. But we will also touch a little bit on YouTube as well as LinkedIn as a bit of a platform to think about. So without much further ado, let's kind of jump into this. And I think the point we need to make from the very beginning is that social media has always been a tool that is social. And, you know, going back through our own kind of archives, it's really pertinent to kind of jump back to the early days. We've been helping with social media since 2008. As a service to, you know, our clients and educating the industry. You'll see on this screen here that Wine Communicators, we ran an event early in 2009. I'm just talking about the opportunity here to be able to grow communities, build connections, and use these new tools at our disposal to be able to tell a story in a very authentic way. Now, the platforms have come obviously a very long way since that time. We've seen the landscape really evolve. But what's really important to think about is that the opportunity that social media has given, you know, brands, individuals, collections of people has really been to be building those connections. And I think it's fair to say that if we think about some of the valuable relationships that we found, you know, certainly for our organization, some really good friendships, connections have all been driven through social media. It's allowed us to be able to connect with people in different regions, build friendships, you know, even in the early days when it was Twitter. You know, I had tiny babies at home where we were working part-time and using Twitter as a way to connect and engage. And it's those relationships that have really helped to bring context about why we are on these platforms. Not a lot has kind of evolved. And if we think about this as a relationship building tool, a tool to be able to tell stories and build connections, it gives the right parameters to think about why we're actually on social media in the first place. So I'd encourage you, as you're thinking about budgets and we're thinking about where we're putting our priorities from a marketing perspective, not to think about social media at the bottom of the funnel where we're looking for conversions. Absolutely, that can happen from time to time, but these tools are here to be able to build trust in your brand, to build authenticity around your stories, and really drive some connections. So often where we find social plays a role in the broader marketing mix is that top of the funnel activities. So to break it down, we want you to think about your social media presence in 3 different buckets. And this might help you think about why you're doing different parts. There is the organic content that often gets a lot of conversations around it on your, what am I putting on my feed? What are we going to share as stories? How are we creating video content? What does my content plan look like for this month? That plays a role in terms of your broader brand messaging, thinking about how you entertain, how you engage with your audiences, and what messages you're conveying. Add to that is the paid amplification. And we've said in numerous opportunities this year that it's very much pay to play. That paid piece is a really important role as the organic reach starts to decline and starts to reach new people. So as we're seeing less people engage on the platforms organically, and if you think about it, there is a huge percentage of the Australian audiences using social media from what happened in, 2007 and 2008. The landscape has evolved. So to amplify that content and get it to the right people, you need to be having some paid part of your strategy. Now, the third part that just seems like it's intuitive, but has actually become more of an art form, is the community management. And that's what we're going to spend most of our time focusing on today. It's that nurturing of community and building a really engaged community around your brand, where time is absolutely the part that goes into this. It's how much you invest back into your community, how you respond, and how you give great customer service that will see you reap those rewards. So I'm going to hand over to Mel as she kind of talks about why community management and why this is such a focus.
Yeah, so in terms of why we are really emphasizing the need to concentrate on your community management skills, it's because it does really humanize your brand. It not only does this, but it also cultivates brand loyalty with your customers or potential customers. It's a great opportunity to understand what your customer likes and dislikes, which also fuels further innovation or new product development for down the line. It also encourages word of mouth marketing by encouraging that engagement on your content. It's also being used at the moment by consumers as a customer service tool. And I think that's something that's a current theme throughout what we'll go through today. So it's really important to understand why you need to focus on it, because if you think about a customer service experience, they expect a timely response. So in terms of what does that then mean? We need to look at what the landscape looks like on social media, and it has changed. So what we used to see is that we used to see content only from those we were connected to or were friends of friends with. Now there's a greater opportunity because we've got these awesome AI tools that Meta are using to serve us suggested content, which is an opportunity to build new connections. So in terms of what I've just alluded to, customer service is a key offering on social media. So here we've got some really good data from Sprout Social that says that 49% of consumers are likely to unfollow an account if they feel that the customer service experience is poor. And what that means is that their comments or messages in the inbox are going unheard or the response is not satisfactory. So from there, we also need to think about, well, what platforms are developing really good fans? And what we've said is that Meta, with Facebook and Instagram being the key channels for driving that community management. And this is really new data. So this is from Michael Stelzner from May this year, which shows that marketers have said that Facebook and Instagram are the best platforms for developing fans. And so as we go on, you'll kind of see why we're alluding to that. So the algorithms have changed. So if you're unaware of what those changes are, again, we've touched on this, the Facebook feed does look very differently. Meta have said that 15% of the content that you see will be suggested content. So content that's not from your friends or family, potentially from accounts you've never heard of. The expectation is that 15% will double by the end of this year. So if you're feeling like you are seeing lots and lots of content that's not from accounts that you follow, that is because Meta is ramping that up. What you need to understand, though, is that that is a massive opportunity for brands to be seen. So I've popped in an example here of my feed. I like to cook and I love pets. And so the content I'm being served is recipe content and events that are happening in my local area that have to do with pets. So obviously these are not accounts that I follow, but they're things that might encourage me to visit this pub in my local area that I have never been to. In terms of Instagram, the algorithm used to be one set algorithm. So no matter what you did, the only algorithm that it worked on was the feed. There are now 4 algorithms on Instagram, which means that there are 4 opportunities for discoverability. So there is one for Reels, there is one for the feed, there's one for stories, and there's one for the explore page. So in terms of Reels, it's thinking about using trending audio and looking at templates, which we can help you out with if you're unsure on how to create this kind of content. But you'll often see content that is sitting in your feed of Reels that from accounts you've never followed. There is a Reels button on your Instagram account where you can only watch Reels from accounts from all over the world. You then have your Instagram feed. Think about things like carousels being a really key opportunity here. So what the algorithm has now done for Instagram feed posts is if you share a carousel of up to 10 images, you have 2 bites of the cherry of people commenting or engaging with your content. And what I mean by that is if I'm on my phone and I see a post from McDonald's and I'm not interested in French fries, I may not like that post. However, when I come back onto the app later in the day, I may now see the second image in the carousel and it might be chicken nuggets, which are my favorite. So that is then the content that I am more so willing to engage with. So thinking about how you're using the different tools, not just say a static image, which only gives you one opportunity to capture the what's the word? I've lost my mind.
The audience.
Yeah, capture the audience's attention. That's what I'm trying to say. Then you have Instagram stories. So here we need to think about our stickers. So we have locations, we have hashtags, and these are both opportunities for discoverability. The other thing to keep into consideration here with Instagram stories is the accounts that you engage with also have an impact on what order your story is shown on the top on your account. So what I mean by that is if you engage with 5 accounts, those 5 accounts, if they follow you, your story will appear in the top, say 5 to 10 stories for them to watch and engage with. In terms of the explore page, we have less control over this. The explore page takes content that could be engaging for others and shows it on the explore page. So this is where you need to be on top of your hashtags and using appropriate and niche hashtags where you are having a higher chance of discoverability, but the algorithm is also rewarding accounts who are engaging with people who are engaging with their content. So in terms of LinkedIn, I'll kind of touch on LinkedIn and YouTube, which is on the next slide, but essentially their algorithms are very different to Meta. The LinkedIn algorithm during lockdown was very much about being viral, and it was that sort of content that was getting good views and discoverability. However, that algorithm has since changed because what they've discovered is that those who are on channels like LinkedIn and YouTube, those people are more so your silent engagers. These are people who are reading your content, watching your videos, but may not be commenting and liking. So you need to keep in mind when thinking about your different measurements to see if content is working. It's not just about how many comments you got or how many people you reached. You need to be looking at audience retention. You need to be looking at whether or not people are clicking on the link that you've got to read your blog, for example. So these are the considerations that LinkedIn is taking, and it feeds into this idea of prioritizing this expert knowledge. So they are showing content from accounts that you follow, that you engage with. You will mainly see content from those accounts who are sharing blogs, videos, seminars, that sort of content. They're really trying to deviate away from Facebook. And then you have YouTube. So it is a bit similar to LinkedIn, and that algorithm has changed quite significantly since 2005. 2005, it was all about SEO. 2012, we were looking at how long people were watching your videos. That is still a consideration, as is SEO. But now the algorithm is taking into consideration things like satisfaction. So you might notice that when you watch videos, you might get served a survey saying, how did you find this video? These are really important indicators for the algorithm, as is that machine learning, which comes back to that discoverability of the suggested content. So YouTube is a really great platform for long form video, and consider your audience retention as your engagement metric. So I'll hand back to Trish to talk about what does this mean for your brand.
So I guess the thing to think about is this, this landscape continues to evolve, and it can seem quite scary and trying to get your head across what am I doing next. And I want to break that down for you today and just say, often there's those three parts. Think about what those three parts are of: organic, the paid, and the community management. Where many of you who have joined us today can play a really important role is about nurturing that community. It's something that many of you do in your venues, in your cellar doors, in your day-to-day relationships. So it's nothing new. It's just using a different tool to be able to foster some conversations. Now, there is a skill in community management, but there's a skill in customer service. So if we think about, those cellar doors where people visit and have an incredible opportunity to be engaged with a story, this is exactly the same thing in your social media. And that's often why we see, brand managers or cellar door managers or the marketing person really get under the bonnet of the brand and use social media to understand the consumer insights. What we do need to think about is, though, it can be a massive time suck. You get into the algorithms, you follow people. So we're trying to give you a little bit of structure today into making sure that you're doing this efficiently and using best practice. But I want you to all remember the fact that many of you are already doing this through your day-to-day relationships with customers, through emails that you're exchanging. It's just a different platform to be able to think about those consumer conversations. So let's have a look at some of those techniques to be able to build the community. And when we think about how we're engaging with consumers, there's often two different parts that we think about. We call them the reactive comments, where you're responding to content that you might have put out on your feed. And that could be direct messages, comments on your brand posts, when someone has shared a story, being able to like that. And I'll give you some examples of that in a moment. But another opportunity for many brands that are not following into this community management space is a proactive engagement. And that's talking to those algorithms that Mel's just alluded to, where the content is being served to people who may not be connected. So that's the audience that we can strategically start to educate about our brand messages. So just to give a bit of an example here, these are the sorts of reactive kind of commentary that you would respond to. So piece of content's been posted on the page, consumers have commented, and you need to go in and actually acknowledge those comments. Now, one way you can do that is to hit the like button, but a better way to do it is to actually genuinely engage in a conversation. And what you start to find is, as the community grows, you start to gain some really good traction. And here's a really good example over to the right with a post that Homo put up as the tennis campaign was launched. And we were talking about the history of Jack Crawford and his win of Wimbledon. And unbeknownst to us, one of his relatives actually followed the page and started to share some stories. So we were able to engage with him. We were able to take those conversations offline, actually send him some wine and really build those interactions with the brand. So it's a great example of how that reactive responses can help to build community. Now, this is where an opportunity really lies with the proactive community. And if you think about it, lots of your brands, when you manage them on Facebook or on Instagram, go and follow other brands. But very few people go through the feed and actually look at the content that you follow. So there's an opportunity here, a couple of the feeds that, looking at from a few clients, Launceston News has been able to put direct flights up from Launceston to Perth. There's an opportunity for you to proactively go onto that feed as your brand and actually start to engage in some of the conversations. In this instance, it might be that people, we're starting to travel from Perth to come and visit Launceston and have no idea who Home Oak might be. Influencers, it's a great way of being able to build engagement with a lot of the brands that you might want to start to interact with. So think about the two of proactive interactions and the reactive interactions where you're commenting on content that has been posted.
And so further to that, there are actually two different buckets here that I want you to consider. So you have connected and unconnected opportunity. So your connected people are the people who already follow you, who are already engaging with your content. They may be your customers or people on your email list. What we mean by this is it's not just about them commenting on your content and you replying. You too, as a brand, have an opportunity to reach out to them. If you have a key customer who follows you on social media and you follow them back and they go through an awesome life milestone, comment on that content and congratulate them. They want to know that you're invested in them as much as you're invested in them as they are into you. So really think about that. I know it probably doesn't feel like the norm, but that's the thing. No, not many brands are doing this. So that is a key opportunity. There's a lot of people or brands who are small family businesses or work in remote regions who do have that sense of community. So bring that onto your social media channels too. In terms of unconnected, this is what I'm calling our niche neighbors, which I'll get into a little bit later. But essentially having a look at other brands who are in a similar industry to you and see if there's any key opportunities from those who are engaging with their content and who you too can be engaging with. So in terms of what does that then mean about being on those platforms, engaging, whether it's on your own or other channels, you need to make sure that you are being personalized with your responses, that you're being consistent, that you're showing a human side, that it's not some generic message that you just pop on, that if someone reads all the comments, it's the same response 5 times in a row. Say, hi, Michael, thank you so much for your comment. We're really glad that you enjoyed your visit. What did you think of XYZ? So really thinking about how you can personalize that message, but also asking them questions. Don't just say, thank you for visiting. Really encourage that conversation, because the more you are engaging and the more comments you're getting, the more the algorithm is going to say, hey, this is a really engaged profile. Let's reward that behavior and push their content out to other accounts who may not be aware of this brand.
Which means you don't need to pay as much money on your paid piece because your organic content is getting better
working
reach.
So much harder. You also need to consider your brand tone. So obviously, if you're very chill and relaxed, having a formal tone on your socials is not going to cut it. You need to make sure that the brand tone is similar to the style of your account. In saying that, in terms of having generic responses, of course, you may want to have some predefined responses, but making sure you are personalizing those responses. And you actually might have an opportunity here that if you're finding you're getting common questions, having a frequently asked questions page on your website that answers some of these might be just a quicker way for you to respond. So how do we find these comments? So we've popped a link here, which when we send through the deck, you'll be able to easily find your Meta Business Suite, which consolidates your Facebook and Instagram comments and inbox messages into one account. So this is what it would look like. You would go in, you'd see your home on the left-hand side, you'd have your notifications and your inbox. So this is where you can go in and you can see if people have left comments or sent you messages. You can also see here, there's a screenshot of explore more ways to grow. And you can see we've popped in an arrow where it says send invitations. These are people who have liked or engaged with your content. And it's a very quick way just to invite them to follow your Facebook account only. Unfortunately, this tool is not available for Instagram, but it is like a 5-second thing. I highly recommend that you do it, say, once a week, to go in and invite those people to the page. You can also go in and see who has mentioned or tagged you in content. So this might be a really great way to create a library of UGC content that you may want to share down the line. You can also use it to manage your reviews. So you may not know this, but people can actually leave reviews on your business on your Facebook page, just as they would leave a Google review. Unfortunately, what we are seeing is a lot of spam in here. So making sure that you're going in, whether it's fortnightly, weekly, every day, whatever is best based on how many reviews you are getting, and going in and hiding any spam, which we'll show you some examples of later, but also responding to some of those reviews, because this is really good feedback on how you could improve or provide positive feedback to your staff. So in terms of the inbox, I've popped in a screenshot here. So you'll see that we can see all our messages. So that's for Facebook and Instagram. But then it also does break it up. So Messenger is Facebook, and then you have Instagram, but you can also see your comments for Instagram and Facebook. Now, there are a couple of little drawbacks here, which I'll get into in terms of your Instagram inbox. So I'll get into that in a moment. However, the other thing you can do is if you have multiple team members who are looking after your account, there are some really cool tools you can use in the inbox, which allows you to create labels or even to assign messages. So this only works for the inbox side, not the comments on the feed. But here you can label them potentially as new customers, as an important message, so that when people come in later in the afternoon or whatever it may be, they know what needs to be actioned in the inbox. The other thing in terms of thinking about the customer service side of things, so if people are using your social media as a way of reaching out to you to use as a customer service tool, when you think about if you send off a request on a website, you often get an email straight away saying, thank you so much, we've received your message, please allow up to XYZ for us to get back to you. You can set up the same automations in Meta Business Suite. And if you have any issues or would like to know how to do this, we're more than happy to help you in learning how to do this properly, but I have included some key screenshots. So there's like a little sciencey symbol that you can click onto, which shows you what's new, and it's an easy way to jump in to show you how to create those automations that you can have a response to acknowledge that you've received the message and set some expectations on when people can expect a reply.
So someone's not monitoring the page over a weekend, for example, or it's a super busy long weekend and you want to be able to say, call us if there's a challenge, or, that's where you can help to be able to give better customer service using some of those automations.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that we have noticed is that some brands are very good at replying to comments on their page, but not necessarily replying to comments on those blind or dark posts. So posts that don't appear on the brand page, but can be served to potential people or target audiences on their own personal feed. So for example, I've included this piece of content from Marley Spoon. So I've just circled, you can see it says sponsored. So this is not something that would appear on their account, but it's an ad that I was served. And there's comments here that have gone unanswered. So where do you find those? Well, you find them in your Meta Business Suite inbox. So you'll go in and then you'll see Facebook comments. That's where it all sits. So making sure if you're replying to comments that you're not just going through your profile and responding to comments. I highly recommend that you respond to all comments through the inbox, because it's a better way of staying on top of what's happening. For larger organizations or people who get an influx of comments and inbox messages, there are some really nifty tools like Sprout Social and Iconosquare, where you can go in and you can set up some automated responses. You can reply to comments. You can assign, similar to Meta Business Suite. It's just done a little bit more jazzy, I guess.
And it costs you to be able to use these platforms. So depending on the size of your organization, there's some really cool tools here, but they obviously do cost you a lot more money. So lots of smaller businesses are using Meta Business Suite, and that's how they're managing it. For larger teams where there's potentially multiple team members that are interacting with the communities, there's other tools out there to let you do that.
Yeah. So in terms of what are the drawbacks of Meta Business Suite? So what we would say is don't neglect going into the actual platforms. And what we mean by this is that whilst you can see your Instagram inbox through Meta Business Suite, not everything appears. So your Instagram inbox has 4 inboxes. So there's a primary, a general, a channels, and a request. So the primary inbox, that's what appears on Meta Business Suite. Anything that sits in the other 3 inboxes does not appear. So you need to be going in and checking those 3. Now, I'll touch on channels if you're unfamiliar of to what that is. We'll jump over to that now. So it's a new tool offered by Meta Business. So essentially, it's a new way of staying connected one-on-one with your followers. So it's a direct message, sits in your direct messages for those who opt in. So they have to opt in to join your broadcast channel. Now, I'd say that the content needs to be different to your stories and it needs to be different to your in-feed posts. So I would say don't dwell on this too much unless you're a bigger organization with brands like, say, such as Wine Australia, for example. This might be something that you want to look into. But smaller brands, this is just more of an FYI. Not that you definitely need to be doing that. So just jumping back for a second, I really want to touch on the request bit. This is where people who are visiting your venue, for example, are going to be sitting in your inbox because you may have never engaged with them before. So they will have tagged you in an Instagram story, for example, which lasts 24 hours. So if you are not checking that inbox at least every 24 hours, there is content that you will miss. So making sure that you're going in there. And when you're in the request, you can view it and it will give you the option on whether or not you would like to move that message into your primary or general inbox. And what the difference between primary and general is, you may just have your primary with 10 key customers and they're the only people you want to engage with all the time. And then your general might be like one-off interactions. I would suggest that you try to move everything to primary, just so that you don't miss anything in Meta Business Suite, because I think that's where you'll probably spend most of your time. So Trisha's now going to talk to you about some other opportunities here in terms of leveraging location tags.
Yeah, these are my favorite part, and we've been stalking this through. Gosh, we used to do it on Twitter when we were looking at hashtags back in the day before it was X and moved on. This is a massive opportunity for you to be able to use this search bar within Instagram to be able to look at different accounts, to be able to look at places, and to look at different tags. So I'm able to type in, for example, Sydney, and I'm able to see the content that is coming up from Sydney, and then can drill down into that content a little bit further where the consumers have tagged that location. We're also able to look at these hashtags and how you're able to be searching for things like Sydney Wine Bar. And from this, you're able to filter that by your top posts and also start to have a look at the most recent posts. Now, where this becomes really powerful for you, let me give you 2 examples of how we use it. So often when people are traveling to an area, we'll use it on a weekend, or, we'll be watching this on our phones, and, we might be seeing who is doing hashtag Hunter Valley. I'll often go in and see hashtag Hunter Valley, who are the top posts or who are the most recent posts, and actually start to engage in conversations with those brands. So we might see that they've arrived in the Hunter Valley, and we might say, welcome to the Hunter Valley. There's some great tips on our website if you're looking for places to eat and visit. It's not about being spammy, it's about being helpful. So that's often a great way to connect with people that are in the area. And the other way is using those places. So if they're not using the hashtag, looking at a specific location, and you can use this as a way of either engaging with different people to find people that might be in that location, or secondly is another great way of looking for influencers who might be useful to start to have a relationship and a connection with. So we might use the hashtag Aussie wine, Australian wine, and have a look at who the biggest people that are following that are. If we're not connecting with those people, it's an opportunity to start to build relationships, or alternatively start to reach out to them and ask them, for some would they like some information about your product?
So that's one way that you can find those unconnected accounts that we've spoken about, a really great way of being proactive with your community management. And the other thing that we've alluded to are these niche neighbors. So what does that actually mean? So this example here has Mad Mex and Guzman and Gomez, two fast food Mexican restaurants. We can see that Mad Mex has about 11,000 followers, whereas Guzman and Gomez have about 65,000. So obviously Guzman and Gomez have a bigger opportunity in terms of the different accounts that are engaging with their socials. So I looked at one of the posts, I looked at the comments, and this is where your opportunity is. We can see from here people who are commenting on their content. So for example, if I saw that Brunette Power said, bring back the fish. If I'm the Mad Mex social media manager, I might be sending her a message, not replying on the competitors, just to emphasize that, actually engaging with them maybe in the inbox or with their own content. Comment or like send them a message and be like, hey, I saw that you're really keen. Did you know that we offer this? So these are really good opportunities to start to find people who were working or engaging with content in a similar industry or who have similar interests to who you're trying to engage with. Now, the other thing we alluded to was that Instagram has now moved to 4 algorithms. So how do we generate engagement on Instagram stories? A really great way to do this is through using their Instagram story stickers. So when you create an Instagram story, at the top of your screen, you'll see a little, almost like a face in a square box. If you click on that, you'll see a menu which will allow you to tag your location, add GIFs and things, but then you have different sticker tools you can use. And I've rated these into 3 tiers. And what I mean by this is top tier is where you'll get the most engagement and low tier is where you'll get the least. Now, the reason behind this is top tier is one click, don't really have to think about it. Second tier, which is using your quiz, that requires a little bit more thought. You may have lots more options. You actually might be offering a quiz that people have to stop and think about it. And if it's too hard, they'll move on. Your low tier are your things like ask me a question or the add a sticker to this collection. So the reason why these two are the hardest is because if you need them to write a response, they have to stop and think about it. And in terms of the add a photo, they've then got to go through their feed. Not saying that it won't generate responses, it certainly can, but there's a few more steps or there's more of a thought process compared to using things like a poll or a link to your website, or even just using the little emoji sticker that people can just press on that and it sends the little love heart eyes or whatever emoji it is that you pick. So these are really, really useful tools in lieu of not being able to have that opportunity to comment on your stories. Obviously, they can send you a direct message, but these are really quick, easy ways to build up your engagement. The more engaging your story is, the further up in the order of stories it will appear for others, and it should ultimately increase the number of views you're getting on your content.
The other kind of top tip on this one is this link one, which is my favorite in the stickers, because the link allows you to get people back to your website or back to a booking form. And obviously you can put in the link, but you can modify the call to action. So you might be running a wine event and you want people to book, you can change that headline to be get tickets here or book in for a cellar door tasting. There's some real power of using that to drive traffic back to your website.
Particularly with Instagram feed posts not having the capability of having links.
Correct. So we have a bit of a challenge for you. What we want you to take away is a bit of homework, and we want you to kind of see what happens over a 2-week period to begin with. And each day in that 2-week period, what we want you to do is to start to engage with 5 new accounts that you have never interacted with before. Now, those 5 new accounts could be prospective businesses that you are trying to get a listing. It could be a specific customer that you know that has authority and influence that you might want to start to build a relationship with. So rather than sending someone wine and just saying, hey, will you review that? Actually building a bit of engagement and relationship with them to nurture that relationship before you ask for something in return starts to pay dividends. So you will start to see, if you start to do this over a period of 14 days, how your community is able to grow and how you're able to organically start to grow your following. Now, what you need to do to be able to make this easier, for many brands, it's a matter of cleaning up the people that you're following. And we know that in the past, it was often a really good way of following accounts that would follow you back. And that was a great way of building our connections. We actually need to stop now and think about the fact that the algorithms have evolved, and we might need to follow some of those people on our personal accounts. So if you love the Kardashians or Kendall Jenner, follow that from your personal account, not your brand account. And start to think about how these people that you're following are going to make it really easy for you to start to have some of that dialogue and conversation. Now, an easy way to be able to do that, and a bit of a tip that we use here internally, is we often use this save button to start to identify those people that we're trying to build a relationship with. They could be influencers we're trying to interact with. It could be media we're trying to build a relationship with. It could be a venue that we're trying to get a listing on. You will have a strategic objective of, who you're trying to build a bit of a community with. And where you can start to use this save feature is you look at the piece of content that might have come out that you followed, and you use this little save button to create a collection. So I could save this post, and I've called this collection Influencers to Engage With, and it creates a separate board on Instagram of those people's content. Doesn't matter what the content is, could be some of these pictures that are random. But then when I start to go in and build a relationship with these people, it helps to narrow down the focus of the people to talk to. So a really strategic way of building new listings, building relationships with potentially international audiences that you may not have a connection with, and narrow that down into a really practical way. So that's part of your homework today. Take that 14-day challenge and start to use this to build some connections.
Just on that, there's two things as well. It's private, so don't worry, it's not appearing anywhere publicly, and it doesn't send a notification to the person if you've saved their content. So if you're worried about that, that won't happen.
You also can make it as a collaborator. Is that right? We often will share boards that we collaborate on.
Yeah, so two profiles can collaborate on one board. So if you as the brand want to have it and you want to collaborate with the business owner who
Mastermind
who has their own account, you can both be saving content to the same board that you have access to.
And then the other opportunity to think through is your commentary in Facebook groups. And this isn't about selling, this is about being useful. So an example of one that we use is we are a member of the Traveling Tasmania group. And we use this a little bit for Homeoak, where we say, right, those people who are traveling in Tasmania, we followed the group. Often when there are people, and this is often we join as the person, when someone's asking questions like what is the best winery to visit, we'll often put links back to our website where we're being really useful, or if we know how to answer some of the questions in that group as locals in the area, that's a really good opportunity to build engagement and be useful as part of that broader set. LinkedIn works the same way. So I know we've talked about opportunities with Meta. This also works really well in the same way as LinkedIn. So you can see an opportunity here to be able to start to build connections and comments on the types of posts. There's a massive opportunity for you to follow the sorts of hashtags on LinkedIn. So this gives you the opportunity to follow the right side of content that starts to appear in your feed. And then being able to engage in that content is a really useful way of being able to build that community. Another great way of being able to do this, particularly for your B2B relationships, is a really good way of being able to use the messaging and the inbox. So you'll see this as an example. I've just joined the the AWRI board, and there are a couple of board members that I had no idea who they were and had never met them in person. So I saw this as a great opportunity to just reach out and say hello, connect with those people through a really personal message. And there's been some really lovely engagement now that has happened with those people since that time, that we're now able to, when we meet in person, have broken the ice a little bit. I know that brands like Coca-Cola use this a lot in their sales training. If they're going into a new venue, they look up some of the relationships that might be existing, a little bit of the background of people, and use that as a bit of an icebreaker tool to be able to nurture some relationships and build on those. Just finally, review sites. Don't forget to check the review sites. There's obviously automations that you can get from Google and from TripAdvisor when you've got a new review. Particularly when people are traveling, this is a really important part of managing that community, and having people find and discover your brand. But it makes a really big difference of when you are responding. And also to give another side of the story that we often see where, people will give feedback that is not necessarily fair. Giving another side of the equation is really important from time to time. Okay, so just looking at best practice here and what we need to do as kind of the final wrap up to this presentation. I think it's really important to note to begin with that we do have a legal responsibility as a brand owner to be responsible for the content that goes on our pages. And that's not just the content that we post, but also the commentary that goes on the page. And there's quite a little bit of case law that's starting to be building with a number of different precedents that have been set where the High Court has made decisions that companies are liable for defamatory Facebook comments and defamatory comments on their page. So without wanting to scare you, I just think it's worth kind of saying we do have an obligation to be not just monitoring our content, but also what goes onto our page. And I think at the moment, being really aware of the consumer sentiment around the brands and around that broader community as we really start to think about the different diversity that's coming to our pages and, the exciting opportunities to be able to talk to different customers that have a little bit of a different profile to what we might have. Thinking about how we're engaging with those audiences and being really respectful and thinking about how we engage is really relevant.
Yeah.
And we found that, I guess, with days like Australia Day has been, quite a sensitive topic. This is a post that, we put up for Narada Tea when we were managing their account earlier in the year. And we saw a massive backlash around Australia Day from a lot of members of the community. And that means that we needed to be really thoughtful and sensitive as to how we're responding. So how do we do that? It really comes down to guidelines. Many brands have got a social media policy in place that sets up front the expectations of those managing the community and makes it really clear as to what the expectations are so that there's no ambiguity for the staff members who are interacting as the face of your brand on what they can and can't do. So we can help you with this policy. I know many of you have got one in place. It needs to constantly evolve as the landscape starts to change. But it's a really important thing to begin with to say, let's make it really clear what is tolerated and what is not, and where the areas of grey are that you need to be able to escalate to get some help. And then being able to respond and incorporate this into your daily workflow is a really important part of managing these communities. So Mel, you manage it a couple of times a day?
Yeah, I make sure that I check on it first thing when I get into the office in case I've missed something overnight. And then I check at end of day because there's usually comments around that school pickup time that I like to get to so that they're not waiting for a response.
Yeah, and then sometimes it works for others to be able to respond later in the evening. Doesn't matter. The point here is that this is something that you do need to check and monitor. It's exactly the same as checking your emails. If you think about it that way, or thinking about the phone calls that you receive, it has to be integrated into workflow.
And the reason why it needs to be integrated is because here's a prime example, Jetstar popping up a post. All these comments have gone unanswered, which has only added fuel to the fire of people jumping on the bandwagon and also sharing their dismay of their experiences with Jetstar. So again, it's coming back to people using this as a channel as customer service and expecting a prompt response. You need to be ready to answer difficult questions or comments. Sometimes they're not needed. Sometimes they're just not helpful. And so you may just want to hide or delete them because they're not appropriate or conducive to what you're talking about. However, this is a really good example from Oatly asking a consumer asking about why the milk is labeled as gluten-free in the US, but not in Austria, for example. And so they've responded to that because that is a constructive question that needs answering. If you're finding someone is being rude, derogatory, you can either remove and block that person. That is more than fine, dependent on what your social media policy is that you've put in place. But some questions you need to be prepared to answer. In terms of trying to eradicate any negative, inappropriate language, you can set up profanity filters. So my recommendation is that you just Google words to include in profanity filter. And there are lots of examples that you can find online that you can copy and paste and pop them into the back end. And once you get this deck, you'll see that there's a how-to guide on how to set this up. And there might be other words that you want to include that are appropriate based onto your brand. But it'll just remove any really inappropriate language. So you don't have to worry too much about that sort of commentary appearing on your feed, but still keep on top of it.
Yeah. And so Mastermind clients can just know this has all been set up. And it just means that, some of the words around alcohol, around offensive languages, racial terms, we have profanity filters that are set to really high on these pages, which means that it comes up as gray when we're looking and managing the community. If it's appropriate, we can go and unhide it, but it just helps to make sure that you're managing that in a responsible way.
Yeah. Onto something that's probably a little bit more positive is actually consider rewarding loyalty. So Facebook has a really good feature where they'll actually pop on the person's comment above their name, top fan. These are the people who have consistently engaged with your content over the years, months, however long you've had your account. That's a really great indicator on potentially reaching out to them and saying, hey, John, really glad to hear that you enjoyed XYZ. We'd really love to send you a bottle of blah, blah, blah. So just really engage with those top fans because these are the ones that are going to advocate for your brand. They're going to recommend it to their friends and family. So you kind of want to keep them happy if you can. Unfortunately, Instagram does not have this feature. However, what that does mean is that you just need to be making sure that you're on top of those comments. And the more personalized you are with your engagement, the more certain people will kind of stick in your mind of, oh, that's right. I remember that Deb lady. She posted last month about us. If you've got one or two people concentrating on your community management, it will be easier to identify who those key engagers are, but also thinking about even running like a monthly report on your top comments or people that you are constantly seeing engaging with your content and start to create that list. So an example here of how this worked really well for us, this is an American influencer who has only recently become an influencer. So she started out with quite a small following. She is an alcohol-free account and she was just discovering new alcohol-free options in America and sharing that content with her friends. She has been nurtured from the beginning of her account to where she is now at 100,000 followers with Geeson through community management, and she is doing free content for that brand with such a large following because she feels that there is real value in that relationship. So don't discount smaller accounts as key opportunities because if you're with them from the beginning and they do take off, they will pay that back in time.
Yeah, and what we've also seen is in times where there has been a crisis and things have gone wrong, and it will happen at some point, those really loyal brand community will actually come to your defense and often will answer the questions, the tricky questions for you, and actually stand up for your brand because they are so loyal. So worth thinking about.
Yeah, and we are noticing that there's a lot of spam. So a lot of people are getting messages in their inbox from Facebook saying their account is going to be deactivated. Just to let you know, if that was ever the case, you would get an email. It wouldn't be a message to your inbox. And if you click on where the message has come from in terms of their profile, you'll see that it's a spam profile. So please don't stress if you do get messages like that in the inbox. We've also touched on the fact that you may find in your reviews page, I've included 2 examples here of people putting in trust company investment opportunities in the reviews page. This is content, if you hit the 3 dots in the top right-hand corner, you have the opportunity to remove that. So highly recommend you go into your reviews and hide that. We are also seeing some spam on Instagram, and it's just about swiping to the left, and that will give you the option to delete it. And don't be afraid to report inappropriate content, because there is some inappropriate things coming up. And with the profanity filters, that is only for words, not images. So just keep that in mind, that if people are posting inappropriate photos, you want to be on top of that to remove that.
Yeah, and report it all the time, because that's the only way the platforms can help to manage it.
Yeah. So what does happen when there's an issue? Really give whoever is managing your account the tools that they need. So get them to understand that they can move that conversation into the inbox. So if someone leaves a complaint, they can say, "Hi, Deborah, really sorry to hear. Can you send us a direct message and we will get back to you?" Get that conversation straight off the feed, but your followers or target audience can see that you have acknowledged the comment. If there needs to be, maybe escalate it to someone more senior in the team, and you may need to bring in management just so that everyone is on the same page and you can all agree on the best way forward, because you don't want there to be any negative brand implications on whatever you decide.
And that's where your social media policy is really important as part of that HR piece. Because, there are issues, and there are some things where I think you need to communicate to your teams, or know that, escalate it to us or escalate it to someone that actually, thinks about this a little bit differently.
Yeah, and I won't dwell too much on this. I've kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the webinar, but you can use your comments as a way of understanding what your customer likes and dislikes are. So if people are asking about particular products or innovation, these are key opportunities that you can report back to business. So in terms of how do you attract engagement from your community, things like thinking about postcards, signage, call outs on your social media. These are a couple of examples of, blackboards or little printouts that you could do through Etsy, of having those within your venue to encourage people tagging their time spent at your venue. You can also run competitions. So this is a really successful competition that Scarborough run annually, where they encourage people to share their content, whether at cellar door or at home enjoying their wines. It's another great opportunity to facilitate content that once you seek permission to use, you can use on your own socials. If you are resharing content, make sure that you're actually telling a story. So for example, if people are tagging you in their stories, don't just kind of repost it and then hope for the best, because to a consumer, that means nothing to them. What are you showing me? I don't understand. So think about using branded colored backgrounds when you're resharing, so they straight away know that this is from Scarborough or this is from Gießen, and include some commentary on there too, just so that they kind of understand what is it that I'm actually looking at. And also think about things like influencer or content creator content, where you can use like partnerships, paid collaborations, gifted opportunities, things like that, where you can use their content. So just touching on that, what I mean by that is you can see at the very top here of this Mindful Mocktail, this is content that Mindful Mocktail has shared. And then she has add a collaboration tag, which she would do, that the brand then needs to accept, which appears in your Instagram inbox. You would accept it, and that content then appears on your feed as well. And you get all the engagement that they get, and whatever you get, then they also have that appear. So it kind of becomes a collaborative post between 2 accounts.
And that's really great as a brand for working with accounts that have got way bigger followers than you do, because then as the brand, you're able to go back in and have conversations with all the content that they've created.
Yeah. So in terms of key takeaways, for me, there are 5 things I really want you to take away from this. It's not just about being reactive. You need to be proactive on your socials. You also need to be consistent. Daily checking at a minimum would be our recommendation. Be present on socials, not just on your profile, but on social media, reaching out to other accounts, engaging with others. Encourage engagement. So consider, if you're writing copy for your own social media, consider your call to actions. Are you asking them to answer a question? Are you wanting them to give their opinion? Put that in the copy. Leave us a comment below. for example, nice and simple. Also, be personal when you are responding or engaging with others. Call people by their name if you know their name, and actually understand what it is that they're asking and acknowledge that in your response.
Yeah. And I think the other, finally is don't be scared about this. Like, think about this as something that many of you are already doing in your businesses. We're here to be able to help guide you on this. It's a landscape that is changing, but many of you in the room today are customer service, kings and queens that do a really great job of doing this across other channels. So thinking about how you can use this unpaid element of building relationships across your social will really help with the content that we're putting out organically, and also with the content that we're amplifying. So it is the part that we have a lot of control over in terms of those relationships, but let's put some structure around it to make that really easy for you. And also remember, we're here to help you. So we're always here, to answer any questions that you might have, to help you with some of the tools that are at your disposal, and to keep evolving in how you can reach new audiences across these platforms.
Yeah.
I can see we have one quick question that has come through in the Q&A. How do you find those collections once you have them, Beck? We'll screen grab them when you go into your Instagram account. There should be a little button at the
top right corner. It's your little burger menu. So you'll hit that on your profile. So you go to your profile page, top right, the burger menu, and then in there there'll be the flag symbol, and it'll say saved. That's what you click on, and then you'll see all your collections.
So that's a really easy way to start to see that. And you'll see for a few of our brands that we've been working with influencers, we've got a few of those tabs that have set up just as a way of identifying people we want to build those relationships with.
Yeah.
So we'd love any feedback. As you know, this is really hopefully helping you to try and understand the landscape, think about how you can have a presence and integrate this as part of your broader digital strategies. Hopefully it's been a really useful session for you today. Appreciate your time. We know everyone's very busy, but we hope that you found that of value.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.